Listen in to what the former foreign minister, now the climate envoy, Adel Al-Jubeir, had to tell me over the weekend.
Our prosperity and our interests are linked to an open economic system globally and to free trade. So it's in our interest to try to find or to build bridges between different camps in the international system. Of course, America is our most important strategic ally, and that's where we are and that's who we work with. But that doesn't mean we cannot try to use our relationships with other countries to try to help narrow gaps.
So Hadley, there was a lot riding on this, and as you say, a necessary reset of the US-Saudi relationship and a step in the right direction for firming up ties with allies like Israel, for example. But the president is leaving the party without a gift bag, and that has to be underscored here because, as we expected, there was no oil production deal with the Saudis. There doesn't seem to be material gains made in Saudi-Israeli or Israeli-Palestinian peace efforts. The Iran deal still very stalled at the moment. And we also had this confusing optics of fist bumps and handshakes that probably won't play well domestically with those progressives who say Biden shouldn't have gone on this trip at all. What I thought was interesting, though, was we also heard from the Crown Prince, who basically underscored how critical this Saudi relationship is, and also weighing in on the energy crisis, saying this push away that we see the West undertaking from fossil fuels at a time like this will only end up hurting the United States and other developed economies. Here's part of what he said. Listen.
Unrealistic energy policies to decrease emissions by eliminating main energy sources without taking into consideration the effects of these policies on the society, economy, sustainability and global supply will lead in the upcoming year to inflation and increase in oil prices.
So there was certainly a lot riding on this, but Hadley, I think the overall point here is the president is going home without a lot being achieved. It will be interesting to see exactly what happens next and what type of follow-up meetings we're going to see. Either way, a positive reset, but the president not really coming home with a lot in his bag, so to speak.
Pretty empty-handed, actually, Dan, and I think that this is something that, whether or not they noticed it in Washington or wanted to notice it in Washington, it's going to have a major impact over time because we're still talking about a president and a set of policies that the oil and gas industry globally and certainly in the United States have a problem with, and they're wondering at what point the president looks to the neighbors, looks to the people at home to start doing more. Now, think about this in the context of the oil markets. We've said again and again, whether it be the fact that in Jennifer Granholm's infamous interview with our very own Steve Sedgwick, when she didn't seem to understand the numbers when it comes to how much oil is consumed by Americans on a daily basis, to even today when the Biden team is still looking at renewables to save the situation at a time when everybody understands at this point that transition fuels are needed. I've got to wonder whether or not the Saudis at this point are just going to be sitting pretty for a while, because what we understand at this point is they are buying cheap Russian fuel to power their oil power plants, right? Because they've got a huge domestic energy consumption. But instead of using their own crude to do that, they're using cheaper Russian crude, and they're continuing to put Saudi crude on the global market at this infamous or inflamed price. So, they're more than free to do that. But I have to wonder if the Americans in the conversations that they had even touched on that, because, there were a lot of mixed messages over the weekends about what had been and had not been discussed, and at the highest levels. I had the chance, as to sit down twice with Adel Al-Jubeir. This is a man who understands climate, but he also understands foreign policy and a rash of other things, and he had to tell me, listen, we believe that there's been a lot of hypocrisy across the board when it comes to policymakers, not just in the United States, but in Europe as well. And we're seeing the results of that in this energy crisis. We've said it again and again, and now the world has got to listen to us.
Indeed. And look, President Biden had to do something, though. He had to come out to the region. He had to have this conversation around oil and energy, given the pressure that he is under domestically back at home. Of course, sliding approval ratings, but also at the same time, soaring inflation in the United States that he is looking for a panacea for. In terms of the follow-up conversation here, well, I think it really puts a new spotlight on what we're going to see out of the OPEC meeting on August 3. Saudi Arabia's ties to Russia, limited spare production capacity among that group ultimately means that they're likely to stick to the status quo, as we always say. But whether or not we will see more oil coming to market really remains to be seen at this point. It's something that the president is definitely hoping for.